Hello, and welcome to the Creative Mojo podcast. This is episode number 34, and I'm coming to you, as always, from my home in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And this is my podcast where I talk about my love of fiber crafts, particularly knitting, but today I actually have a little tiny little bit of spinning to show you, and some sewing projects that I haven't started yet, but I am planning to get started on fairly soon. And so there are some other crafts besides just knitting today. Welcome to all my returning viewers. It's really nice to chat with you again, and welcome as well to any new viewers. I hope that you'll enjoy the podcast and come back and check me out again, and maybe consider subscribing with the subscribe button below here on YouTube, and coming and joining our Ravelry group, which is called Creative Mojo Podcast. But if you search that in the groups tab on Ravelry, you'll find our group, and come on over there and check us out there as well. And today is, I just had to look down and see. Today is Sunday, June 18th. It's Father's Day today. So I hope that you've all enjoyed something lovely with the men and the fathers in your life. Yeah, I just came back from having lunch at my sister's house with my sister and her husband and my two nephews and my father and his wife. And that was really nice. I hadn't seen really any of my family in a few weeks because I've been super buried under with work, but my schedule's lightened up a little bit, so it was really nice to get to Sunday afternoon to spend some time with them. My husband, unfortunately, is out of town working at the moment. He's a professional musician, so he tours quite a bit, so didn't get to spend Father's Day with him, but he'll be home tomorrow, so we'll do something nice in celebration. And yeah, so anyway, I'm going to just dive right into my knitting and show you what I've been working on since it's been a couple of weeks since the last time I podcasted, I think right at the end of May, so just over 2 weeks. So I do have a few things to show you. I have two finished objects. They are both pairs of socks. That was, for a while, that was all I was really knitting on, was socks, mostly just vanilla socks while I was working a lot, and vanilla socks are the things that I sort of have both time and brain power for. So that's what I got done. I think I showed these close to being done last time. These are vanilla socks that I made for my husband out of some Arnie and Carlos Regia and Arnie and Carlos design line. They're really nice. He really likes them. He hasn't had a chance to wear them yet. When I make socks for him, I always hold off on them until I can show them off to you guys. But it's pretty warm here for the most part these days, so he hasn't been wearing his handmade socks quite as much. But anyway, they are two. I'm really pleased with how they turned out. As you can see, I managed to match them up really nicely. They pretty much are identical, other than, I think I mentioned on the podcast last time that the cuffs are not exactly the same because there was a knot in this first bit of the yarn, and so the pattern repeat here was not as it should be because the yarn was knotted, but I was able to figure out where to start them on the next sock. So as you can see, they line up really nicely. They've got heel flap and gusset top down, as I always do, 68 stitches on a 2.25 millimeter needle, which I think is a US 1. And yeah, they turned out really beautiful. They're a nice dense fabric. The colors are quite pretty. I think I mentioned on the last podcast this would not be necessarily my most favorite colorway, but my husband picked it out and he really, really likes it, so that's really what counts. And actually I enjoyed very much knitting them. Almost all of these socks got done while I was working, other than I usually stop and do the heel flap. You'll have to excuse me, by the way, if the light is not great here. It is later in the afternoon. It's just after 4, I think, and it's getting cloudy outside. It was a lovely day today, but now I noticed that it is getting cloudy, which makes what I can do in the way of actual natural light not as good in here, so it's mostly directional light from overhead, which is why there's a shadow on my face, and I tried all kinds of things and nothing I can do about it, so we'll just have to live with it. It gets worse as the sun goes behind clouds, I've just noticed. So anyway, that was my first finished object since I last recorded, and my other one is yet another pair of vanilla socks. These ones are for me. I really enjoyed knitting these. I can't, The yarn that I used for these is Ancient Arts, Fiber Arts, which you've probably seen and heard of on other podcasts. It's a Canadian yarn. It's actually dyed here in Calgary, I think. Yeah, I think she dies out of Calgary, but they're becoming quite a popular yarn line. And this is the first time I've actually got a couple of skeins of this in my stash, but this is the first time I've used it. Really nice yarn. This is just her, I think it's called Classic Sock. It's a merino nylon blend, but it is super soft, really soft and squishy and kind of plump. It just knit up, and the colorway on this is so beautiful. It's called Vancouver, this colorway, and it very much is wonderful Vancouver West Coast colors. I knit these as well, top down, 64 stitches. Same size needle, 2.25. I did a Fish Lips Kiss heel on them. I used some Stranded Dye Works in the colorway Limoncello for the Fish Lips Kiss heel. They fit really nicely, and I don't have too much in the way of, I think I have one tiny little hole on, just on this one side. There's a, if I can show you there, there's a tiny little bit of a hole, but nothing too much. Yeah, I'm very, very happy with how these turned out, and like I said, I really enjoyed knitting them. The only problem I had with these was that I knit the first sock, I knit the foot a little short. It was a little tight in the toe, which made the heel not quite fit properly. So I knit the second sock, did it to the right length, and then I ripped out the toe in the first sock and reknit it, made it a little longer. But so 2 finished socks. Yeah, these are, I'm looking forward to wearing these. These are, as I said, the yarn is just unbelievably soft. I do highly recommend this Ancient Arts, just the regular sock blend. It actually might be an 80/20. I can't remember, and I don't have the tag in front of me. But yeah, it's a really, really nice sock yarn. Like I said, just was a pleasure to knit, and it's really soft and squishy and lovely. So those are my 2 FOs since I recorded last. And I've taken a tiny bit of a hiatus, not from socks in general, as you will see, but from vanilla socks. I do have a pair of vanilla socks. One little vanilla sock. I guess I'll show you that one. I'm trying to remember which one of these bags it's in. Not that bag. It's in... I cast these on last week. My husband and I decided to go last Sunday night, so a week ago, to a movie in the movie theater, which we don't do very often. We just don't often have schedules where we're both free with nothing to do at the same time, and we had Sunday night off. I closed my show after the Sunday matinee, and we just decided it would be a nice little date night, and so we went to the movie theater. We went to see My Cousin Rachel, it's called, which is a period mystery, I guess you would call it, sort of. Really enjoyed it. Really lovely sort of period film. And just before about an hour before we went, I suddenly thought, I don't have any vanilla socks left. I had just finished these, or maybe I had the toe to rip out and reknit on these, I think, but didn't want to do that in the movie theater. So I cast on a new vanilla sock just to knit on in the movie theater, and I knit the cuff. So I knit most of the rest from the cuff up while we saw that movie. And this yarn is, I've had this in my stash for ages. It's the Unwind Yarn Company in the Journey sock, which is an 80/20, 400 yards, and the colorway is called Feria de Valencia. It was a club, it looks like. Somebody, I believe, sent this to me either in a swap, or it was either a swap or one of those get your yarn wishes granted or something to that effect. But isn't that pretty? Really, really super pretty colors. It's getting a little washed out there because of the crappy indoor light, but it's actually a little brighter in real life. It's turquoise blue and kind of that Kelly green and yellow and orange and purple. And as you can see, it's sort of stripy pooling in a really fun kind of way. So those will be nice. Those are for me as well. So that's, I do have that one little vanilla sock, which will become my just sort of purse, bus, that kind of knitting for the next while. So it may be a while before I finish those. Now that, as I've said before on the podcast, when I'm working at my theater job, I'm a stage manager. I get a fair amount of knitting time, but I can, but only on knitting projects that I can just go round and round in and don't have to think about. So I do a lot more vanilla sock knitting and things like that at that time. The rest of the time, vanilla socks are mostly, as I said, restricted to purse knitting for, those times when you need that, like I said, the bus or waiting in the doctor's office or things like that. So, then I have two other pairs of socks that are sort of active. I'm going to show you this one, I think, first. These I cast on a whim about 2 weeks ago, and just powered through the first one of these. This is kind of fun. One of the girls that I was working with on this last show, my assistant stage manager actually, she turned to me one day about a month ago or so and said, "Can you please show me how to knit socks?" And she'd been watching me knit in rehearsals and stuff. And I think that she knew how to knit already. She had learned, she told me later, she was actually very, very crafty in high school and had done sewing and knitting and crocheting and several other kinds of crafts, all kinds of different crafts when she was in high school. And she every once in a while did a little bit of knitting, but she hadn't really had the opportunity to really branch out and learn a lot of different things. She, I think, kind of knew how to knit and purl and had made some scarves and things like that, but she never really progressed beyond that. But she'd been watching me knit socks and she was really interested in doing that herself. And so I said, sure, I can show you how to knit socks. And I brought her in some sock yarn out of my stash and dug around and found something in my massive stash that I didn't think I would get to necessarily all that soon. It was just a ball of commercial sock yarn. And I took her in a needle, magic loop needle, and because that's the way I knit my socks, so that's the easiest way for me to teach someone else. And showed her how to cast on and said, here's how you do the leg, knit the leg, and then when you get to the length you want it to be, I'll show you how to do the heel. And we just did it in stages like that. She took to it really quickly, kind of like a duck to water for sure. The only thing that was very interesting to me was that when I showed, let me get this vanilla sock back out here and use it as a demo. When she got going on the leg, and she was probably about this far along, and she showed me what she was doing, and I looked on the inside here. She was doing 2x2 ribbing, same as what I've got here. But on the inside, her, so obviously the ribbing, the knit stitches on the inside are the purl stitches on the outside, right? Her purl stitches on the inside, where they should just be normal knit stitches, were twisted stitches. And I couldn't quite figure out what she was doing that was twisting her stitches on the wrong side when she purled. So she showed me, and she was purling by wrapping the yarn up from the bottom and over instead of we normally wrap the yarn from the top over. She was wrapping the yarn upside down. And that was actually causing the stitches to twist on the wrong side, which I thought, I got to remember that for knitting through the, like sometimes when it gives you the instruction to purl through the back loop, this would be another way of doing that. Making a twisted stitch on the reverse side is, instead of purling through the back loop, you just purl as normal, but you wrap your yarn the opposite way, and that actually will, I discovered, twist the stitches. So I had to sort of show her how to purl properly so that she didn't do that all the way through. But other than that, she just flew through that pair of socks. So when she got to the heel, I taught her the heel, the gusset, then the foot, the toe, and then she was off and flying and knit the other one all pretty much on her own, the second sock all on her own, and she finished that pair of socks in, I don't know, a week maybe. And then she decided she wanted a pair of knee socks, so she went and got herself some more yarn, and she cast on and she found a free pattern on Ravelry, and she flew through a pair of very simple knee socks with just some striping along using two different colors at the top, and then the rest of the sock plain color. And then she decided she wanted to do another pair of knee socks and do them in a lace pattern. She found a free, I think it was a drops pattern, and with a lace panel down the front and the back, and both the knee socks had quite a bit of shaping to them and stuff. And she, again, flew through those, including she messed up the lace pattern a little bit. She was about that far into the leg of it, and had, she'd been a little mistake in the lace, but also she didn't like where the decreases were. She was starting from the cuff down, so, and with knee socks, obviously they're wider at the top, and she felt like the decreases were too close together and the sock got really tight around her calf, so she wanted to make those decreases farther apart. So together we figured out how to rip back. I put the needle in for her at the place where she wanted to rip back, which was not fun, picking up the stitches all the way through the lace work at that point, but I picked up the stitches for her on another needle, and then we ripped all the way back to that. Same way you would use a lifeline, except she didn't have that lifeline in there, so we put the needle in as if it were the lifeline. And she just flew through those again and got those done. So she did that 3 pairs of socks in about 3.5 weeks while we were working. But I was looking at these knee socks and going, now, because I'm like this, I see somebody else do something, I'm like, I want that. I was like, I want some knee socks. I've made so many pairs of socks in my knitting life, and I never made myself knee socks. And I started thinking about it. I remembered that when I was a kid, I never liked knee socks, which is kind of why I hadn't never knit them for myself before, because they never fit properly on me. And I have what I like to call sturdy peasant calves. I have a wide muscular calf, but then I have a fairly narrow and shapely ankle. So there's a dramatic difference in the size of, from my ankle to my calf. It's quite curvy, right? And the problem I had always had with store-bought knee socks when I was a kid was that they were either too tight around the calf. My legs are also fairly long, so they often didn't go up high enough. They were if they fit the rest of my foot nicely, they were too tight around the calf, or if they were wide enough that they fit my calf comfortably, they were too wide in the ankle, tended to be, and they would always fall down. But then I thought, well, now that I, am an accomplished sock knitter, I can make myself a pair of knee socks and just tailor them to fit me. So that's what I did. And I did the first knee sock. These are very funny. I've been referring to them as my elephant socks because they are gray and they are very long and they're like an elephant trunk, as you can see there, all that. My legs are not quite as long as that, but because they stretch this way, obviously I made them a bit longer, and I made them very much to fit. So I started with, I think I cast on 98 stitches for the ribbing, and I did a fairly, I think I did 25 rows or 30 rows, can't remember, of ribbing. I put a little cable all the way down the back, so it has this pretty little cable, which on the second sock I will just reverse the direction of that cable. Runs all the way up the back to the heel. And as you will see, this is we're talking about the shapeliness. So I knit, like I said, I think I had 98 stitches there. Then I increased a little bit after the ribbing, and to accommodate the widest part of the top of my calf, which is pretty wide. I think I got up to 104 stitches, maybe, something like that for the widest part. I have it all written down. Let's see if I got it all written down in here. No, I can't, of course, find my notes. Better find those. Anyway, I cast on a few more stitches, and then I started sort of slowly decreasing. So as you can see, it's pretty wide up here, but then it decreases. It looks kind of funny because I went down to 60 stitches in the ankle. I wanted to make sure that these socks fit quite snugly so that they would stay up, and which it seems to do. Anyway, I did that cable all the way down the back. I just kept trying it on as I went, and putting in decreases. I did the decreases fairly far apart in the widest part of the calf, and then as my calf curves down fairly dramatically to the slimmer part of my ankle, I increased how close together those decreases were. And I decreased to about there, and then straight down at 60 stitches. I did heel flap and gusset. And then the foot, I've got these little markers in every 5 rows just to count how many rows I did so it will match for the second sock. So it's basically the same as a regular sock, except I did all this increase and decrease, and then, like I said, I just put this simple cable down the back. So, and I really like how this fits. It's really pretty. It's not something I probably will wear in the summer, but I flew through this first one. I did this in about 6 days, this first sock probably. And I've started, and that took most of this. I bought two skeins of yarn for this. So this is how much I have left of the second skein, which I would say is probably about 30 grams. So one sock took about 60 grams. And I have started the second sock, although all I have of the second sock is just the beginning of the ribbing. With the second ball of yarn, and it's all tangled up here. Anyway, the yarn that I'm using is Yarn Ink, which I've talked about on the podcast before. It's another local to me Alberta dyer. She was just outside of Calgary here. Really pretty color. The color is just slate, and it's just a variegated gray. I chose to do it in the gray. I knew I wanted a neutral. This was not from my stash. I went specifically to Stash, one of my local yarn stores, and picked out this color because I knew I wanted a neutral, something that would go with lots of different things. So that's why I looked at some tans and some browns and creams and stuff, but I really like this gray, so that's what I went with. And I really enjoy knitting with Yarn Ink. This is her classic sock, which I've used for socks before. It's what is this one? It's a 75-25 maybe. I can't see because the price tag is covering that up. Yes, it's a 75-25. So yeah, I did the first of those. I haven't worked too much on the second one because I started another new project, which I'll show you in a minute. But I'll get back to that fairly soon and knit that second sock. The third pair of socks that I'm going to show you are socks that I'm working on for our knit along. We have a knit along running in our Ravelry group that started at the beginning of June and runs till the end of July. So there's still plenty of time if you haven't joined in yet, but if you would like to, it is a sock cal, because as you can see from what I've shown so far, I knit a lot of socks. And one of my favorite designers for pattern socks is the designer Cookie A. She's got a million patterns on Ravelry, some free, some paid for, some difficult, some easy, so many different patterns. And so it's a Cookie A knit along. You can knit any socks by Cookie A. You can enter as many times as you complete. Like if you complete more than one pair, you can enter twice. And you just have to cast on after June 1st, which obviously if you start now, will be after June 1st, and cast off by the end of July. We've got some folks doing some lovely pairs in the group, and I cast mine on about a week ago, I think, 10 days ago. And this is how far I've gotten on. I'm on the first sock. I just completed the heel flap and gusset and a few rounds into the gusset of this. These look so funny. They look so narrow, but this pattern has you do ribbing on the back and then a lace pattern on the front. So they're actually pretty stretchy. You can see that really pretty pattern. This pattern is called, I think I called them something else, like the Casbah socks or something, but they're actually called Istanbul pattern. It was a pattern from Cookie's, one of her sock clubs back in 2013, I think I got it in that sock club and hadn't knit it. I showed you a different yarn that I was going to use. I was going to use some Wool & Boon, but I changed my mind at the last minute when I cast them on, and I'm using Flock Fiber Studios. Yet again, another local to me, dyed here in Calgary, yarn maker. It's two gals that Nikki and, oh gosh, I'm terrible. Can't remember the name of the other lady, but they do beautiful work, and their yarn has been featured at a couple of Alberta Fiber events that I've been to in the last year. And so I have I think I have 4 or 5 skeins in my stash, and I decided to break one of those out for this pattern. It just seemed perfect. This is the Take a Hike sock, which is an 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon in the colorway Antique Shop. And I thought Istanbul Antique Shop kind of was a nice name for this. And it seemed like a fitting sort of yarn. So I'm really enjoying knitting with this. As you can see, it's a very pretty, I should have brought a sock blocker over, but it's a very pretty lace pattern up the front. The variegation in this yarn doesn't hide the lace too badly. It does a little bit, but not too much. I think more it doesn't show up super great because tonally the color's not super different from skin tone, but like if this was a dark blue or something against my skin, it would pop a bit more. But very pretty, very fun pattern to knit. I struggled with it a little bit at first because it's not the most easily memorizable pattern, but it just took me a little bit to get into the rhythm of it. And the lace just goes down the front, which is nice. That's, like I said, the ribbing on the back, and then the lace will continue on the foot and with stockinette on the bottom. So enjoying knitting those, and we'll have those done in plenty of time for the end of July for our Cal. So I really hope that you'll consider coming and joining. I do highly recommend Cookie A Socks. If you haven't tried pattern socks before, she's fantastic for that, because even her most complex patterns can be done by anybody. They're so well written that if you just trust and follow the pattern, you can do it. And I have a prize to show off for that, Cal. This just came in the other day. This is something I ordered as a prize. It's a beautiful Canadian dyer, Riverside Studio. She's out of Ottawa. And this is really lovely. This is so soft and squishy. This is an 80/20 3-ply yarn. So it's a little bit looser twist. It's not the super tight twist of like 4-ply is often what sock yarn is, but oh my gosh, it's so squishy and so soft. And the colorway of this is called Sand. You can see, so it's this lovely kind of tonal beige with these flecks of brown and gold and this sort of orangey red. So pretty. So that will be a prize for the Cookie A Sock Cal at the end of January, it's summer. Don't rush through it. At the end of July, and depending on how many entries we get, I may pick a second prize as well. So, as I said, come and join in that. And the last knitting project, the one that has gotten the majority of my attention, I cast this on Tuesday, I think Tuesday evening. So Sunday, so the majority of the week, about 5 days I've been working on this, and I've been working on it pretty monogamously, and really, really enjoying it. This is the So Faded sweater by Andrea Mowry, and I talked about this in the last podcast that I was planning to cast it on. And I thought, oh, I should get a few other larger projects off the needles. And then I thought, no, I'm just going to go for it because this is really what I want to do right now. And it's a bit hard to show at the moment. But I put it onto 2 needles, which at least will help it spread out. It was all scrunched up on 1 needle. So I am almost ready to separate for the sleeves. Not quite, but close to ready to separate for the sleeves. You can see that. That's the front there, and that's the back. I've got that much. I just started into my second color. So if you're not familiar with Andrea Mowry's patterns, she's got several patterns out now that employ the color fading technique, where you start with one color and then you alternate rows for a few rounds. One color, then the next color, then the first color, then the second color, again, the first color, and then you drop the first color and continue on with the second. And you pick, depending on what kinds of colors you pick, if you pick colors that are kind of close together in a color or tone, or where there's some colors that are that are similar, the fade will be more or less obvious. I think you can see in mine here, if I show you right there, is where I was striping in the second color, and when I hold it back a little bit, it's really hardly obvious at all. So the first I'm using Skein yarn, Skein Studios yarn for this whole project. I didn't bring last episode I showed all the colors I was using. I don't have them all up here with me now. I just have the first 2. But I started with this color, which is called Cheshire Cat, and it's fairly color intense, as you can see here. It's a white base, but then there's pinks and yellows and oranges and blacks and grays. And then and little bits of purple maybe. Yeah, there's little bits of purple in there. And then I switched to my next color, which is similar, but it's just stronger in the white. And this color is called OMG. And as you can see, when I hold the two up together, they are definitely, this is more saturated with color. This definitely has more white, but there are a lot of the same color tones in it. Definitely that pink and then kind of the gray. And there's even a little bit of sort of yellowy green in there that matches kind of a yellowy green in there. So I just dropped the second color and first color, and I'm on to just knitting with the second color now. I saved back, this is about, I think this is 25 grams of the first color, because I will pick up and knit the collar band with the same color. So there should be plenty of yarn here to do that. I will continue on with this color. As I said, I'm not very far away from, there's a lot of stitches on this right now. I'm knitting the largest size. I do tend to like this kind of sweater to be not too form-fitting, but to be a little bit baggy, a little bit loose, a little bit positive ease, I guess we would say. And I wasn't getting the most brilliant gauge ever. I did this is my swatch, which I swatched in the round. It was pretty close to gauge, but it was a tiny bit out, but I liked the fabric. I certainly didn't want to go up a needle size, which is what I would have had to do. It's a tiny bit small. And I thought, well, I'm knitting the size that's a bit too big for me anyway, and I know it will grow and it will grow a bit when I wash it. And I didn't wash, and I was a bit lazy, but I've knit with skein yarn so much, and I've knit sweaters out of it before, so I'm pretty familiar with the way it grows when I wash it, sort of what my gauge is at various different needle sizes for sweaters. I think I've knit 3 sweaters before, plus tons of other shawls and socks and stuff. So I use just a different colorway, but of the same yarn for my swatch. Anyway, so I think that this is going to fit plenty fine. There are so many stitches right now. There are 500 and I think I'm at 516 stitches. That's right before I'm a couple rows before splitting for the sleeves. I can tell it's going to fit really well so far. I may put a few in. The pattern just calls for knitting straight down the body. I may put a few increases and a little shaping into the body. I'll try it on and see. But I will knit till I've got about 50% of this, or 50 or 40% of this ball left. And then I will start the new color, because that will allow me, I'll probably start the new color at 50% actually, because that will allow me to use this in the sleeves as well. Leave about 25 grams for each sleeve. And then I will go on to third, fourth. I do have actually 5 colors in this fade that I don't know if I will need 5 colors. I'll see how I get. I'd like to use up most of the yarn of the 4 colors, so we'll see. And the reason why I say I'm not sure I'm going to need 5 is I have actually knit a faded sweater in the same yarn before. Actually makes me chuckle a little bit, because I knit a faded sweater just before the fades became so super popular and everyone was doing them. I had I have a lot of single skeins of skein yarn in I have one whole bin that's all just her yarn, and most of it is single skeins of fingering weight. And I had noticed at one point last year, as I was rooting around in that bin for something that I had quite a few skeins that were in very similar color tone, and I was looking at them all together, a group of them together, and thinking how pretty they would be in a garment. So I just thought, oh, I'm just going to like fade from one color to the next and use these single skeins to make a sweater. Unbeknownst to me, not 6 months later, that became a suddenly very, very popular technique. So I was a little bit ahead of the trend on that, and I was going to show you. This is what I knit the first. It's a little wrinkled because it's just been in my drawer. And there's a bunch of my hair stuck to it. This is the, it goes this way, I think. This is the Laneway Tunic by Vera Valimaki. And I used 5 skeins in this, but I didn't use all of, I used all of, I think, the first 2 skeins, and then about 3/4 of the second skein, about half the third skein, and not even half the, no, third, about start this again. Almost all of the first 2 skeins, about 3/4 of the 3rd skein, about half the 4th skein, and not even half of the 5th skein. Now this has short sleeves, but so I would have used a bit more, but it's a tunic. So as you'll see, it's very, very, very long. So yeah, this one faded from a kind of a gray with little tiny, I don't know if you can see little tiny speckles of blue in there. My light, yeah, you can see over there, into a color that had a little less gray and introduced in some pink, but that blue carried through into the 3rd color kind of is there, which was more blue in the background, but still with the gray and pink. And the 4th color is there. And then the 5th color is way down there on the bottom. So there's more and more sort of dark color. The black kind of grows as you. And then, as I said, it has a shorter sleeve. I love this. I just haven't worn it in a bit because it's even at a fingering, even though it's fingering weight, it is kind of warm, and even though it's short sleeve, so it's more of a winter garment. But anyway, so what I have realized is I really enjoy the faded sweater. I started that, like I said, on Tuesday, and I've just been knitting away like a maniac on it and can hardly wait to get it done. I just really love that technique. It's sort of an interesting combination of it being essentially a stockinette sweater, so it's pretty mindless. That her pattern, Andrea Mowry's pattern for the So Faded sweater, is very lovely and easy to follow, and mostly you're just knitting around and around, which I enjoy. Some people are bored by that and want more pattern and more complications and lace and whatever in their garments. I tend to I do that a lot in my socks, and I enjoy shawls, but in garments, I kind of get into a zone, and I really enjoy stockinetting around. Go figure. I just sort of I find it very relaxing and very meditative, and I'll just sort of sit and watch TV and knit. And it doesn't bore me at all. But what holds my interest in these patterns with the fade is watching the color play. And that's just really enjoyable to me as I add the 2nd color and watching how it transitions from one to the other and seeing if I can tell where that transition is, or if it kind of goes as seamlessly as I hope it does when I pick my colors. So that's fun. And it does have that same, people talk sometimes about knitting striped, self-striping socks, that you get this sort of, well, I'm just going to do one more color change. I get that a little bit with I just want to keep going until I can introduce the next color, or until I finish up with the striping of the 2 colors and can go on to the next color or whatever. So I have those little points that also continues to propel me along. So that's what I've been working on a ton. And that is my knitting for this week, or the last, I keep saying week, but it's been more like 2 weeks and change, really. I did do a little bit of spinning, which is amazing. I haven't really done any spinning since I started this podcast. So just over a year, I talked about spinning. One of my very early episodes, I showed you my huge spindle collection. But I don't know what, I just sort of took a hiatus from it for a bit. And so I just told myself that I needed to get back into it. I do really love it. I own a lot of beautiful spindles. I own quite a bit of fiber. It's an enjoyable thing. And I have to work up, because I haven't done it in a year, I have to actually do it in little bits, little increments, to work up those muscles again. Because when you're spinning, where's my empty spindle here? Here's my empty one. Well, it's hooked into my fiber. You're doing a lot of this sort of motion and holding it and holding your arms up and stuff. So it is useful to do it in little increments, because my shoulders will get a little sore until I kind of rebuild up those muscles. So, but I have started on this spin, which I had talked about in the last podcast that I was going to work on for Tour de Fleece. So I have two braids of this. This is this other braid. This is Sun Valley Fibers. It's 100% BFL. I love spinning BFL. If you're a fairly new spinner, especially for spindle spinning. I don't wheel spin, so I can't speak that, but certainly for spindle spinning, BFL is really nice because it is a longer staple fiber. It is a little easier to get the hang of with how to spindle spin without it pulling apart on you. I spun, I think the first really sort of successful spindle spin that I did was with BFL. And this is really soft. It's really lovely. This color is called Vineyard, sort of brown. This is a sort of purpley brown and green. Very, very pretty. And as I said, I have 2 braids of this. So each braid is 4 ounces. So I have 8 ounces of this. So what I've done with the first braid is I split it in half. I just undid it from the braid, pulled it together into sort of 2 long pieces, ripped it in where met in the middle, and I will do the first half probably of that. So that's the second half of the first braid. All the rest of this is the first half of the first braid, and I will try and get all of that onto one spindle. That might be, I don't know, that might be a little ambitious, but I'm hoping that I can get 2 ounces onto one spindle, 2 ounces on the other spindle, and then apply those together and then start on the second. I won't get all of this done. Don't get me wrong. I will not get all of this done for Tour de Fleece by a long shot, but this will be a sort of a long-term project, but it's nice to have it going in. So I have done, it's a wee little bit, but that amount, it's spinning up really nicely. I'm trying not to let it spin too fine. I'm hoping to kind of get a fingering weight with it to a sport weight. That'll depend a bit on how it plumps up after I apply it and wash it. But yeah, so far it's turning out pretty nice. It's still all in the brown. How I tend to work is then I'll pull off a piece from. So working on this, I'll pull off a chunk. I pull off about that much. I just draft it a little bit so that it gets a little lighter and airier, and to wrap it around my wrist like that, hold it, and I can't actually do it very well here because I got a table in the way, but this is drafting really nicely, this BFL. So, oops. Yeah, so I've started on that, and I'm really super pleased that I've started on that, actually. And I'm trying to do a little bit of that, 15 minutes or so at least every day, and see where we get. So that's my spinning. And the last thing that I was going to talk about is, oh, I didn't bring the patterns over. Sewing. I picked up 2 more patterns. Darn. I'll show them next week, or next episode. But I picked up 2 more sewing patterns. I showed you a couple of sewing patterns that I got online from 100 Acts of Sewing. I also picked up 2 patterns. I went to the to Fabricland, which is a local sort of chain fabric shop here. It's kind of, I think it might be similar to Joann's. We don't have Joann's here, but it might be similar to what Joann's is in the US. And it's funny here. We don't have any good fabric shops really here for clothing fabric. We have several really nice quilting stores, which is great. And then we have the Fabricland. I think there are a number of them in the city, and they have some nice stuff, but they don't necessarily carry really high end, the kind of, cotton and steel or any of those kind of nice designer fabrics lines. There's no place to buy them here. So I rely on picking those kind of things up if I go to another city or order them online. But it's often really nice to actually be able to buy fabric in the store where you can feel it and touch it and see what you think it's like, that you can't do online, obviously. And they were having a big sale, a big beginning of summer sale, 40% off everything at Fabricland. So I went there mostly to get a couple of notions, because I came home with some fabric. Came home with some fabric and the notions that I needed, and what else? A couple of patterns. I got 2 Butterick patterns, one for a very simple sort of shell top, and one for a very simple skirt. So I have 4 patterns now to work from. I'm quite excited about. And I picked up these 2 fabrics, which I'm really, really liking. They were a great price. It said 40% off. I got this, which I can't remember. I think my sister said this is like a seersucker. Is that right? I don't know from fabric terms, but it's got that little bit of texture in it. It's really pretty. It looks a little more gray on the screen. It's actually black and gray and a kind of a very gray navy as well. It's really pretty. I really like it. And I'm going to make either a skirt or I might make one of the tunic dresses from the 100 Acts of Sewing out of this. Really like it. And then I got this, which I really like too. I kind of sense a theme here. I obviously like plaids in fabric, or it's the flannel that I showed you last time is also a plaid. But this is really pretty. This is very soft. This is really nice soft cotton. I think I'm going to make a top out of this. I think. Not sure. But yeah, I think it'll probably end up being a top. So maybe not the shell top, but maybe a sort of tunic top. I got 3 yards of this, so I got enough to make whatever. Anyway, so that goes with my future sewing plans. I'm hoping next weekend, after I get through a few things that I'm doing at work this week and make some more headway on that sweater, I'm hoping that I can pull out the sewing machine next weekend and dive into the sewing. That's my fingers crossed. Or I do have a little bit of time off coming to me from work, so I may take a few days off as well and dedicate those to sewing. We shall see. Anyway, I believe that is everything that I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope that you are having a lovely start to summer. As I said, I hope you had a great Father's Day, doing whatever you do to honor the men in your life. I know some people feel sad around Father's Day, as they do Mother's Day if their parents have passed, but I hope that means that you took a moment to think about your parents and your dad, and hopefully you had a good relationship with your dad. I know not everybody does. It's funny. I feel like I'm sticking my foot in my mouth with this, but I will say I do understand all about that. I have a great relationship with my father, but I also grew up with a stepfather who was in my life pretty significantly from the time I was about 8 or 9 years old on into my 20s. And I had a very difficult relationship with him. We get along much better now at this point in my life, but we did not. When I moved out of home when I was 18 or 19, I think I just turned 19, and that was because we had a very difficult relationship at that point, and it continued to be very difficult. We didn't speak. I didn't go around the house. My mother didn't speak about me in front of him. We had a very difficult relationship. So I also understand what it's like to have a person in your life who is a father or a father figure. He certainly was very much a father figure to me, but he was not somebody that I find it super easy to celebrate as a wonderful father, because he had his faults and his flaws, and he did some things that I might not have done had I been in his shoes. But we have mended fences on that, and while I will never say, oh, he was such a great father, he wasn't still an important person in my life, and I am glad that we have an easier relationship now. So I do understand all the complexities around holidays like Father's Day, but hopefully you managed in some way to do something enjoyable, or do something for your father, with your father, about your father, for yourself, or if it's your preference, maybe you've done something really just enjoyable for yourself and ignored Father's Day. So I'll stop talking about it. Anyway, as I said, I hope that you're enjoying the beginning of summer, and I look forward to talking to you again in hopefully only a week this time. Now that my schedule's so done, I'm hoping that I'm going to get back to weekly podcasting for the rest of the summer. But definitely 2 weeks, if not 1 week. And in the meantime, happy knitting.